Coming up to the next one, we have eminent speakers from industries who have created a benchmark in their respective areas of operations. This session is on Open RAN and the journey of enterprise network. And I would like to call upon K.S. Rao, Chief Corporate Officer, STL, Dr. Rajkumar Upadhyay, Executive Director, C.Dot, Arun Karna, MD and CEO, AT&T India, Rohit Chaudhari, Field CTO, Telco Vertical, HPE India. And the session will be moderated by Faisal Kawoosa, Founder and Chief Analyst, TechArc. Over to you, Faisal.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this what's going to be an interesting discussion where we are going to talk about one of the very interesting emerging topics, which is ORAN, and how its journey is getting into enterprises and how it's going to redefine the enterprise communication basis what all empowerment and enrichment it will do to networks. That's what we are going to talk. And I'm really privileged that I have with me a distinguished and very learned panel today who will talk about this topic. So just a quick introduction. I have Mr. K.S. Rao, Chief Corporate Officer for STL. Hi, Mr. Rao.
Good afternoon.
I have Mr. Arun Karna. He's MD and CEO for AT&T India. Hi, Mr. Arun.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
I have Mr. Rajkumar Upadhyay, who's the Executive Director for C.Dot. Hello, Mr. Upadhyay.
Good afternoon, Faisal. Good afternoon, everyone.
And I have Mr. Rohit Kumar, who is the Field CTO for Telco Vertical at HPE. Hi, Rohit.
Hi, Faisal, and good afternoon to the panel.
Okay, so I think everybody knows what's happening with the ORAN in India and globally right now. At least people in the industry know it very well, and we know how ORAN is sort of not just disintegrating, but at the same time, empowering network in a way, democratizing network, and creating unheard synergies, which perhaps couldn't be thought of without this kind of approach and without this kind of orchestration of network, I would say. But then let's get into specifics. And to begin with, Mr. Rao, so your company is while it's contributing to the Indian ecosystem, but it's also doing a fantastic work globally, especially in Europe and Japan. So how do you see, when we talk of ORAN as a technology, so how do you see it complementing 5G, and what's exactly happening in global markets where you're already present?
Thanks, Faisal. I think good afternoon, everyone, once again. So I think what we are seeing in the current context for the last few years, so on one side, we believe is digitalization happening across global economies. And most importantly, post-pandemic, this has actually become very evident that now the investments are actually happening. So towards meeting this demand, I think this technology disruptions have come on way, and we find that now 5G is taking its own space. If you see in last 2 decades, the way that telecom has evolved from 2G to 4G area, now the speed at which 5G is evolving is absolutely fabulous. And we have seen that in most of the markets where 5G trials have happened, our commercial installments have already done, operations are moving on. So I think while this is happening, there is also conscious thinking happening across these ORAN alliances, which is formed by 30 plus telcos, basically to look at if you have to build a network from now onwards for next, let's say, a few decades, it has to be something different. That is where this whole while ORAN was there in the system for some time, for last several years, but it got a lot of importance in the last few years, especially if you look at most of whether it is Japan or Europe and US, definitely greenfield wireless operators have started adopting it. And Rakuten being the first mover advantage, you see they have done some partial ORAN installments, and it's already in use. And we find that a large greenfield operator in the US is doing this ORAN in a very big way. And even government supporting that. FCC is saying that if you do it in a new technologies, probably there is an incentive and equal penalty if you don't do it. So there is a lot of focus from government also promoting new technologies like ORAN. Same is the case with the European telcos who are greenfield operators. So while this is happening, moving at a very speed with the greenfield operators, also I believe a lot of work happening with the brownfield telcos, because see, you can't compare with greenfield and brownfield, because brownfield companies have invested into legacy networks for last 10, 20 years. So they have to migrate, they have to transit into this new technology in a very, very structured manner. They can't overnight shift to ORAN technologies. But if you see in India, what large telcos are doing in terms of their trials and their partnerships with the large companies, same as the case with, I think, global telcos. So, on and all, I would say that ORAN is now definitely picking up in attention, and primarily because it makes the future networks very agile, and it is a time for telcos to reinvent their entire way that they were building networks so far, and keeping it network to be more agile, or also to be most cost effective in terms of TCO efficiency. So keeping all these things, I see they're very interesting time for people who wanted to move into, let's say, open source technologies for anything. I would just get into this. Let's say if you see PC industry several decades ago, I had gone through a similar situation when it was proprietary, it was vendor lock-in, and you have hardware and software actually clubbed in the same system. But as soon as you interlock that, as soon as you disintegrated both hardware and software, you've seen that not only adoption, not only scale, the cost effectiveness of today, I think, has come in a very big way. We believe the same thing will happen in ORAN, at least in the wireless networks with ORAN as a technology. And I think definitely this is, we find that it's a need of our, and people are serious and people are investing. There have been some projections around every operator has certain investments planned for either for trials or doing some experimentation, or some greenfield operators really investing heavily into building their networks with ORAN. Interesting to see next 5 to 10 years, this should become a major portion of wireless networks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rao. So the crux is that the opening has started for ORAN, and it is definitely something which will enable, it's going to be a fundamental over which the future networks are going to be deployed, and that's how we see the networks going forward. Coming to you, Mr. Arun, we know enterprises are going through digital transformation, and where do you see software-defined networking essentially playing that critical role in this? What would it mean for digital transformation?
Right. So as you know, enterprises these days, they are concentrated on 2 or 3 aspects. One is, how do you maximize the performance of its networking and IT investments by deploying leading digital technologies? I think it is digital technologies that have helped the enterprises not only survive, but thrive some of the challenges brought about lately by COVID. But even earlier, there was a movement towards digital transformation, realizing that these are the technologies that would enable enterprises to remain competitive. So one aspect is maximize performance. The other aspect is, how do you contain costs to the greatest extent possible? So while this is happening on the one hand, on the other hand, the importance and complexity of networking continues to grow. And how would that be? So as more and more digital technologies are adopted, there is this concerted move towards the cloud, and also a proliferation in the Internet of Things. So now we have a far more dispersed kind of enterprise where the endpoints have proliferated. There are IoT endpoints, there are mobile workers needing access to critical enterprise applications from anywhere, frankly. And you couple that with this wholesale movement to the cloud, and now going to multi-cloud hybrid environments. That's really a sort of a complex scenario for enterprises to take care of. And this is where the power of software-defined networking comes into its own. So I would say some of the prominent area where SDN enables digital transformation is 3 or 4 areas which sort of gel well with the enterprise aim, so to speak. So first is simplification of the network itself and increase in agility. So basically, we know that SDN allows enterprises to keep up with the changing nature of their businesses. It is elastic in nature. It enables them to be more responsive to the constantly changing needs of their end users, customers, and also, the market opportunities are evolving so quickly. So SDN enables that kind of flexible architecting which is required to meet the constantly changing needs of the business. The way it simplifies the network architecture is by removing the complexity from the architecture, which is caused by the increased movement of apps across mobile and cloud platforms. So, there has to be a sort of a complete view of those things, which SDN provides. The other is the ability to scale up and down automatically. That elastic nature of the technology itself. It handles high traffic, so it scales up to the certain peaks of high traffic during the busiest times, while prioritizing the most important applications and reducing congestion through intelligent automation. So that's number 2. Thirdly is hopefully it helps in containing costs as well. I think the very fact that intelligent network automation can be deployed to provide connectivity to the cloud on an as needed basis. So sort of a pay-per-use where organizations pay on a consumption-based model, very much like the cloud consumption model. That model is now extended to cover the network connectivity layer as well. And I think the real power, if I may say, of SDN technologies lies in the virtualization of the network itself. We know that fundamentally SDN is all about separating how data is controlled versus how the data flows. In the SDN environment, we know that the intelligence behind how to treat data is separated from the actual physical transmission of the data. And that is the real power of SDN, really. Because this abstraction allows enterprises to benefit from network function virtualization. So a lot of the network functionality, network functions are moved away from dedicated physical devices into software functions, which run off generally available hardware, but the function itself is softwareized in a sense. So I would say software-defined networking is the key that businesses will require to unlock the full potential of their digital transformation initiatives. Being able to dynamically manage capacity alongside usage and tweak prioritization for key application, that will allow businesses to get the best bang for their buck and help them thrive in a more competitive environment. So I would say, in that sense, digital transformation and network transformation by way of adoption of SDN technologies kind of go hand in hand. So those would be my opening thoughts on the subject. Faisal.
Okay. Thanks a lot for an elaborate explanation, but nicely put. If organizations have to transform digitally, obviously networks also have to transform. And at the same time, organizations are very dynamic nowadays. Priorities change by every, hour or, day or a very short span of time. So, networks or the whole, technology architecture, so to say, needs to align with and be adaptive to this dynamic change.
Sure.
Coming to you, Mr. Upadhyay, I see you in a very, very, very strategic role for the country right now, where you're driving the whole, entire, I would say, R&D agenda for the country and trying to create wonderful products out of here. And with the, the push on vocal for local and Atmanirbhar, I think this becomes very, very paramount. So just sir, asking you a question around, one, what are the opportunities that are there? Because a lot of startups are definitely, exploring software-defined technologies, ORAN and other things. And there are certain challenges which are globally there in ORAN. So are those challenges specific to certain geographies, or they pan out to India as
well? Thank you, Mr. Faisal. I think it has been summed up well by Mr. Rao and Mr. Arun. First, let me define that this open network is not only coming in ORAN. In fact, we have been benefited by the open network in terms of when we were selling our Wi-Fi boxes. We had a proprietary wireless controller, and the customers used to say, other Wi-Fi, other APs, access points are not working. So we designed tip-based wireless controller, which was an open network, and it solved the problem. So that is one kind of innovation. So same way, I mean, if I define in general, open network, what it describes a network that uses open standards and it runs on a commodity hardware. In other words, open network is the ability that various parts of a system that define a network are open in terms of subsystem compatibility, be it hardware or be it software. If I look at the RAN market, traditional RAN, we had complete software and hardware from a single vendor, Nokia, Ericsson, Jetty, Huawei. And these vendors will build a proprietary hardware and implement the interfaces in their own way. So you get the complete solution with all underlying components from a single vendor and implemented in a proprietary manner. One, their dependency on a lock-in increases. But the question is, with the open network, what if there is better supplier or innovator who can do some part of the system in a better way and which is open so that other parts can easily integrate. So therefore, this open RAN, when they started, it started with it had many meanings. The disaggregation of RAN hardware and software could be one thing. The hardware could be a vendor neutral hardware or working on a general purpose processor. So disaggregation is happening in multiple ways. A split RAN with RU separate, BBU separate, or a split RAN with RU, DU, CU separate, or a split RAN with integrated RU, DU, and CU, depending upon the type of application. The advantage is to control RAN also, we were talking about the optimization and controllability. Our RAN intelligent controller is coming up. Now that can be designed by somebody else. That is again a software-defined component of the open network, open radio access network. So you are allowing various parts to be opened up and supplied by different vendors. Now beauty lies in open interfaces. So implementations can be achieved using open interface specification between components. For example, RU can come from somewhere, CU can come from somewhere, DU can come from somewhere, RIC can come from somewhere, all on a vendor neutral hardware. So all these components can interwork if the interfaces are open. So what it leads to? It leads to diverse ecosystem for the operators to choose best of breed options for their 5G deployments. Solutions can be implemented. The hardware typically used to come from these vendors, and something goes wrong, you'll have to really beg them, replace this hardware. Now, these solutions can be implemented on either bare metal or virtualized or containerized platform. So the supply chain diversity is highly ensured. What other thing it means? Because you are opening up various components of the chain, innovation is bound to happen. New technologies like AI, ML, CI, CD, all this will come into play. Competition will increase, which will lead to improved service. Network performance will be better because you are now, implementing best of the optimization on the controlling software. Cost is going to be down. And this total cost of ownership is going to be down, and we are going to see unlocking of new revenue opportunities. Yes, there are challenges. Challenges do exist in the form of integration of RAN components from multiple vendors, because now the operator has to deal only with one vendor. Now, if there are 4-5 vendors are coming up, I see a lot of integrators will come. There comes the role of CDOT. We can help facilitate integration of various components. And there are many bodies which are helping this ecosystem, like TIP, ORAN Alliance, operators are doing GSMA, and all are working together continuously so that we define the interfaces clearly and reduce the interoperability problems. I'm sure the whole ecosystem will come together and see this new innovation in the RAN hardware. Thank you.
So Mr. Upadhyay, Dr. Upadhyay, really good to understand that the ecosystem is opening up. It's a good point for India startups as well to really benefit and leverage from this trend. And we could see many companies, uh, something like STL kind of companies in next decade or so coming in from India and taking Indian technologies global. Coming to you, Rohit, when we hear of HPE, it's all about IT which comes to our mind. So help us first understand what is HPE doing in telco, and if you could also talk about some of your maybe how have you helped the telecom ecosystem with some of your maybe technologies.
Yeah, thanks, Faisal. Thanks for asking the question. So yeah, so traditionally, if you look at, yes, HP is a core partner of every IT organization. At the core, we are selling IT servers and storage softwares and services. But we are also playing a big role if you look at the telco from last almost about 2.5 decades. If I see our history from the telco perspective, we have been playing a critical role in 3G when the 3G packet codes got disaggregated and they moved some of the functions to x86 server. So we started our journey largely from there. Then moving on to the 4G, when operators started the disaggregation, obviously there was lots of risk involved. So we stand up there and as a HPI from our IT background, and we bring up a systems which is pre-validated, pre-configured, with lots of reference architecture, working with lots of ecosystem partners like Red Hat, like so VMware, to give them a complete control on the system and the confidence to deploy a system as if they were deploying in the earlier situation where NIP used to bring up those systems and they were taking the control. So taking the same experience of our 4G and 3G deployment, we also thought to have a role in this ORAN and vRAN. Obviously, IT vendor had no role in ORAN and vRAN, erstwhile ORAN and vRAN, when it used to come from the NEPs as a appliance. Now, with the disaggregation of vRAN and ORAN solutions, definitely the x86 servers are going to play a critical role over there. So we did a deployment about 2 years back, hundreds of sites with a tier 1 operator in US. And those deployments are not some trials or lab trials or field trials. Those are production deployments. With that learning, we brought up a RAN optimized VDU servers, which is our DL110, worked with the ecosystem vendor. And we know when we talk about network, unlike IT, networks are very dependent on the latency, on the performance of the hardware, the NIC card, the driver, and the firmware. The cloud suite, which is sitting on top of it, the optimization of the cloud itself, right? And the packet processing part. So the whole work we do, we then bring up the reference architecture, and our reference architectures are not going to lock you in, because within the reference architecture itself, you are able to pick and choose various components as per your need, as per your network fit. And that's the work we do, and that's what gives you the confidence to basically get into the disaggregation of ORAN and vRAN and confidently deploy a technology which is pre-validated, pre-configured, and pre-tested with not only with the hardware standpoint, also from the ecosystem standpoint.
Okay, good, Rohit. We got to understand what HPE does in the telecom ecosystem, and thanks for sharing a couple of instances out here. Coming back to you, Mr. Rao, I want to understand, in India, I think success of the technology lies in when it really percolates through to the rural. And then, there are concerns about, how would the cost benefit fit in when we probably, get into the ORAN. So help us understand how will, 5G per se, and then, maybe, enabling technologies like ORAN help take it to rural. And also, how, there is some resistance still in adapting, say, ORAN. So what do you have to say, how to really overcome those?
That's a very good question. So I think my colleagues have touched upon some of the benefits for what O-RAN brings to the table. Of course, there are technological advancements. There are also the agility related, network agility. Also, I think one important factor being the total cost being effective. So there are many benefits of O-RAN in general. But if you extend this logic to rural networks, which is where I think country is currently going through several ways to achieve that rural penetration, because India still has a digital divide. A lot of people are in the rural are still not connected to the internet. I think what it brings is definitely, I think O-RAN has the potential to eliminate those challenges that typical networks have faced in connecting to the rural, both in terms of network adaptability and agility, as well as that being cost effective in time to come. Because one of the reasons that most of the networks in rural not got much invested is because of the viability and then the revenue predictions being lower. So as the cost needs to be very effective. That's one part of it. I think the second is that it also, I think, O-RAN actually, if you look at the scale of economies, I think if you really say where the connectivity needs exist today, and most of the urban, semi-urban is widely connected. I think that there is a scale that which you can actually require to connect is far required in the rural connectivity place. So to the extent, I think there is a noble reason why such technology should be invested in being cost competitive. I think this is the numbers in rural penetration will definitely catch up as the technology matures, because as we discussed some time ago, O-RAN is definitely an interesting thing, and a lot of greenfield operators have started investing into this and deploying commercial network operations, whereas let's say brownfield operators are actually contemplating the right method and right strategy for transiting from existing to new. So there will be a mix and match of both. I think other important thing is that a country like India, I think, see, what happens is it also brings a diversified, I would say that supplier ecosystem get developed. I think O-RAN provides, a tremendous opportunity for in benefiting in 4 different ways. One is, as O-RAN gets into more and more popular, more and more penetration into the network proliferation, you'll find that silicon industry will get required to be developed, which is also India is poising towards preparing for that kind of a preparedness. Second, I think system and service industry will also require to be supported. I think you'll find a lot of investments coming there. And most importantly, manufacturing industry required, which is also India is well poised today in terms of setting up new investments with the government of India's benefits, which are coming towards whether it is PLI schemes, specs, whether the entire support which is coming on the design development initiatives by government, especially in the recent budget, what government said around 5G area, they've actually said that 5% of USF funds will be dedicated for innovation in the 5G area, which is a very welcome move by government. I think all of this definitely will force that the ecosystem towards achieving this O-RAN, including 5G, India will become a focal point, in my view. And to the extent, I think there is a need for connecting rural India. There is a need for developing ecosystem in India. It's a perfect match next, I would say, 5 to 10 years for leveraging this opportunity for both for the nation building as well as technology companies in India, like what CDAT is doing in research, what several companies like us are into industry development on investing heavily into the development of new solutions. A combination of both academia, industry, and research will have to take a definitive path in taking this leverage. I think the important factor is that what happens in a typical legacy networks in Open RAN technology is that system integrators will take the center of entire thing, because in a multi-vendor network operability, when you are working on an open source and a disintegrated manner, the system integrators' knowledge and their capability has to be enhanced, because you are expecting someone to have a knowledge about multi-vendor solutions and ability to create a network which will actually support, I would say, multi-customer applications. It could be enterprise, could be rural. To the extent that the system integration capabilities have to be developed towards making this O-RAN successful. So the challenge I see is that 2 things. One, the O-RAN, from a legacy perspective, Brownfield telcos will have their own timed phased manner investment because they can't overturn. So that's one challenge which they are allowed to adapt to. Second is it requires, I think, a lot of ecosystem development, and which is where I think both, I would say, telcos as well as ecosystem has to work together. And third is that this actually requires a very capable, knowledgeable system integrators who need to integrate these multi-vendor solutions. So to the extent developing that system integration is also a very important area to focus. If you address all three, I think typically in 5G, there is going to be huge investments happening. We all know that we have seen in next 10, 20 years, the areas that would be invested in 5G is tremendous globally, including India. Even Government of India is planning for some BharatNet extension program. So there is a money being invested. I think at 10 to 15%, 20% of that investment, usually in any technology, let's say proliferations, I think new technologies must be encouraged, if not more than that. I think to start with, I would say even a 15, 20% of what investments in going in 5G, if a country or a global adopting a new technology like O-RAN, obviously it will actually become the base for the next decades to come in. That is where I see that Government of India is also encouraged, where CDOT has played a very important role developing Indian core, and TCS has been working in making this Indian, let's say, technology for O-RAN. So there are a lot of focus are coming up in terms of getting the ecosystem, not only we develop for India, but India is poised towards making it for global today. And it's perfectly in the current geopolitical scenario, it catches huge attention. In fact, it's the right opportunity for Indian companies or technology companies to take a leverage on this present scenario and take an advantage and be a 5G open source ecosystem supplier or solution provider to the global markets.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's a great thought. Traditionally, we have always been kind of followers, we see something happening in global, on the global scenario and then following that. But this could be a good, leap frog kind of a thought if we directly go into something latest. Interesting point out there. Coming back to you, Mr. Arun. So, we know while we talk about network virtualization, digitalization of oil, but at the end we are, organizations per se are, virtualizing, which means there are definitely concerns of security. So one, I wanted to understand what are, the drivers, the key drivers from business as well as security aspect for secure access service engine and a service edge, sorry. And then where, how do one start with it? And is there any learning which we can take from?
I would say the overarching trend or driver these days is that network and security are clearly converging. Security is a top of mind issue for everyone, be it companies, governments, institutions, or even individuals. And, the reasons are very, very obvious. So market drivers, including increased number of remote workers, proliferation of IoT devices, mobility, and now 5G and Wi-Fi 6 are coming to the mix. And they're all driving networking and security to convergence. And so now network and security are now not two separate discussions, they are a single converged discussion. There's a huge convergence going on between network ops and security ops. And I would say there are four distinct yet interlinked trends that are driving the shift to what I would call software-centric cloud networking and security. So first is increasingly enterprises now have more users and applications located outside their own data centers. They need to be covered with network coverage and also needed to be provided the security layer to be transformed to offer low latency access with unified security. So that's number one. The other trend is the proliferation of remote mobile workers. So, thanks to COVID, that moment has got accelerated. But even in the post-COVID world, the users, sensitive data, and network access will be highly distributed across company-owned and personal devices because the future of work seems like it would be mobile first and from anywhere for times to come. Point that I was making was about zero trust, the need for zero trust network architecture. And the reason being that organizations can no longer operate under the old model where everyone within the network was taken to be secure and trusted. And we know that's not true. Security controls are moving closer to the data with the assumption that traffic is not trusted, not trustworthy, unless explicitly defined to be so. The other point is the rise of multi-cloud environments. Enterprises are increasingly going for the best fit cloud service provider for each application. There's a huge uptake of cloud-delivered SaaS applications. Enterprises are increasingly going for next generation high-performance apps, which are best fit for that particular use case. So this requires highly elastic and automated clouds, which will help meet the new demand set. So if you look at this kind of enterprise network scenario for a modern enterprise, you would need an intelligent, secure, connected network for the hyper-distributed enterprise. It will have to be user-centric, dynamic, elastic, multi-access, and with software-defined parameters. And this is where I would say SASE comes in, because SASE is that architecture which combines an organization's network and security functionalities into a cloud-based service, and that operates closer to the endpoints and distributes traffic quicker and more efficiently than traditional networks have done so far. So by uniting an organization's necessary network and security services under a single pane of glass into one platform, SASE aims to simplify network and security management, so to speak. Now, what lessons can we learn? I think we can learn lessons from maybe the precursors to SASE, which was SD-WAN. And SD-WAN is very much a part and parcel of the overall SASE architecture as well. So I think 2 or 3 things come out there. One is enterprises trying to embark on the SASE journey could very well start with SD-WAN itself. In that sense, you could look at the SASE journey as SD-WAN++, but not necessarily so again. You could start with SD-WAN, or you could start with cloud security, or maybe both at the same time. It actually depends on the business context. But I would say if you were to look back, and because SD-WAN came a little bit earlier in the game and is still a part of the overall SASE architecture, I would say 2 or 3 things we probably can learn from that journey. One is the need for a POC. I would always recommend that before you start on a big bang transformation project with SASE, maybe start with a more limited case POC and see whether that can be scaled up and whether that meets your business requirements. And the POC should give you a very good view of how will it do when it gets scaled up. So that's number one. The other is, I think, the choice of a very trusted service provider is necessary because, however you might want to do it internally, there would be operational challenges. And if not handled well, then they could become very, very overwhelming. So you would rather work with a trusted service provider who has the vision for the future, yet that service provider takes into account what is your current state of the network, what is your current state of technology, what are your inherent skills base within the company, and therefore, how should the journey to SASE or cloud-centric services be paced so that it doesn't cause disruptions within the enterprise network. It's a live network. It serves the whole enterprise. The whole business depends on it. In transforming, which is a necessity, you don't necessarily want large-scale disruptions which bring down the whole business. So that's what I would say in this regard, Faisal.
Thank you. So Rohit, what we discussed so far. So we discussed, for instance, disaggregated RAN. There is this disaggregation of network taking place. Help us understand. There are some concerns also around it. Okay, like network management becomes an issue, security becomes an issue. Okay, and every CTO or any technology leader would have these apprehensions. And second is also, and that's why probably sometimes they feel like, the existing RAN is, good enough to cater to their needs. So how does, an organization your help, in getting over this fear?
So what we have done with our, as I said, decades of experience with NFB and NFBI as an infrastructure vendor. So we have developed a VRAN or ORAN program within our company. We obviously, there are certain points which rise around the TCO and how those are going to be controlled when we talk about Open RAN. When you disaggregate, there are risks, obviously, that needs to be taken care. Obviously, there was also a point that from the security perspective, how do we secure our edge? So Mr. Arun talked about SASE. But coming in from the HP point of view as an infrastructure vendor for ORAN or the VRAN deployment. So what we have done, we have thought about 3-4 pillars. One from the infrastructure or the platform perspective itself. How do I optimize my platform to fit into the operator's TCO? So the overall use case itself, they are able to move forward with the use case itself, the operators, right? So the servers itself is designed in such a way that it is taking care of the overall ORAN TCO. Servers are also designed considering as the rural deployments is going to happen, especially in our country. So how do I ensure that multiple radio antennas are directly able to connect, and how do I connect more antennas to a single platform? So if you look at our platform today, DL110, I can connect maybe 18 antennas today directly to the platform itself. Then if you look at if you compare with the traditional ORAN or traditional RAN deployment, I would say, there used to be a component called cell site router. We are also looking into or working with lots of ecosystem partners. How do we bring in the cell site router itself in our platform in the form of VCSR, right? So that costed item or another hardware component at the RAN site is removed, and that brings on the TCO, right? So these are the work we are doing from the infrastructure perspective. Now with the decades of experience within the data center, we learned how data center systems can be managed, monitored, and certain tasks you can also automate, right? The same experience now we are trying to bring into the edge. How do in data center, I always had a control. I always had lots of IT team members who had expertise on the IT system to manage those systems. Now I'm talking about edge. That also tens and thousands of edge sites. So we are developing open source tools and technology, one in the form of the system itself, which is our ILO. HP worked closely with organizations like DMTF to bring in the red face-based manageability, open manageability. That's what people are talking about today. So I'm not locking you. It's an open API. You are able to manage, orchestrate, automate your tasks across your edge system. Further to that, we also work with Intel and other partners to bring in the framework called ODIM, Open Distributed Infrastructure Management. Now, ILO and the red face is towards my infrastructure. I'm also looking at, as an HP, that how do a operator manage a multi-vendor ecosystem from the edge perspective. So ODIM is targeted towards that. It's again open source. It's targeted towards managing and automating the task on the edge for HP and non-HP infrastructure, right? That's the second thing we are trying to do. Third thing, as the role of SI will come into the disaggregated infrastructure, right? So we are trying to see what all we can do as infrastructure vendors so that systems are at least ready to ship at the edge site, and then bulk of the work, whatever it needs to be done, can be done through the automation and orchestration. So we then add it up with our services to make the systems ready from the firmware, from the BIOS, from the automation perspective. So systems are ready to ship, and then from there, SIs are able to take a control centrally, and then they are able to deploy the RAN software on top of it, right? Then the fourth thing, there is a cost pressure as well. So how do we how do we basically propose this as a service model, cloud-like service model? So with our HP Green Lake coming into the picture, we make it consumption-based offering for our customers, so that it's not just upfront buying. You can pay as you grow, or whatever way you want to say, or cloud-like, or the consumption-based model. So that's the fourth pillar which we added to this overall ORAN, or the virtual LAN program, which we are running inside the company.
Okay, thanks, Rohit. I think these points would definitely help any technology leader get over those concerns and fears and probably be more open to ORAN. So coming to you, Mr. Upadhyay, Dr. Upadhyay, I wanted to understand one, how do we really ensure interoperability in this what appears to be a network jungle? And at the same time, is there really a need for having this common reference definition?
Yeah, thanks, Faisal. Yes, interoperability is a must. It is a definite requirement. And to facilitate this, ORAN Alliance has clearly defined the Open RAN interfaces with the split options through their work groups. 9 work groups are working under ORAN. Definitely, RAN component vendors need to ensure that they follow open interfaces very strictly. In addition to help the ecosystem, ORAN Alliance and TIF have announced a partnership agreement to ensure that they develop and deploy interoperable open RAN solutions and help the ecosystem. ORAN Alliance has also joined hands with GSMA to accelerate the adoption of open RAN to take advantage of new virtualized architecture. So definitely interoperability, these organizations are working to help the ecosystem. In fact, TIP conducts regularly plug fests for interoperability testing. We at CDOT are setting up campus network and interoperability lab. We invite any vendor in the country, whether you develop RU, CU, DU, core, anything, any component of the 5G ecosystem, you can come to our lab. We will test it, integrate it, and let you know whether it is working, it's not working, or where some changes required. We already have deployed 5G SA core in our lab. So using our lab infrastructure, Indian companies can come up. We have also set up a 5G industry consortium. We invite any of the vendors, developers, or anybody connected with this to take facilities of CDOT, because I know for startups buying costly testers will be very, very difficult. Therefore, we will be able to provide these kind of infrastructure to various component vendors so that they become interoperable. Your second question was about reference design. Yes, there are a lot of work is happening in this direction also. In Feb 2020, TIP and the Open RAN ecosystem launched an Even Star program, which is basically focusing on building general purpose RAN reference designs for 4G and 5G networks in this Open RAN ecosystem. I'm sure these are aligned with the 3GPP and ORAN specifications. Open RAN Policy Coalition was launched in May 2020. It represents a group of companies formed to promote policies that will advance the adoption of open and interoperable solutions. So a lot of work is happening, and I think these are evolving. And as previous speakers had told, that already the greenfield operators are deploying. A lot of deployments are happening around the globe, and we are sure that if we come all together, especially using your platform, I would like to tell that CDOT will be very, very keen to help the Indian ecosystem to become compliant, to become interoperable, because we have seen in our 4G POC when we are doing with BSNL, even if your system is perfectly developed in the lab, it takes a lot of time to really work in the real network system. So we will be, from the CDOT side, we will be able to help the Indian ecosystem. And I think journey is going to be exciting in future with the Open RAN bringing innovation, reduction of the cost.
Okay, that's great. So let's hope we have many more players from India and with support of C dot and other ecosystem out there.
We want
We
lot
definitely
many.
have.
We want lot many Huawei's to come, lot many jetties to come. I'm sure this is happening with our 4G success, which is soon getting deployed in BSNL. I'm sure that if the talent given in India is so enormous, we build IPs for the West. I think if we all come together, I think it's not at all a difficult job for Indians to develop a system which is not only useful for the India but also globally. I'm happy that companies like STL and not many companies, Lekha, Sukta, Sankhya, Redis, so many companies are working, and we would like to partner with all of them. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's always heartening to see companies like STL taking India global. That's always there. And equally, global partners like AT&T, HP always ready to support this initiative and, build a very thriving technology ecosystem out here. Well, gentlemen, I'm towards the end of the discussion. I got my answers, and I'm sure that audience also got very elaborate and learned answers for many questions, which I'm sure must have been there in their minds about ORAN and the future of network enterprises. Just to conclude, I just want to run a very quick poll with you to understand where is India vis-a-vis global, telecom markets and others on both ORAN and the network enterprise networks. 5 is just at par or even advanced than that, and obviously 1 is the other side. So starting with Mr. Rao, what is your what rating would you like to give it?
A 3 rating.
Okay, great. Mr. Arun?
I would agree with Mr. Rao, 3 rating. A lot has been done, but a lot remains to be done. So I would say the potential is there, right there. I would say 3.
Okay, Mr. Kumar, Dr. Upadhyay?
I think maybe if I look at from the CDOT perspective, maybe we were a little late in coming up with 5G. Yeah. But as previous speakers has talked about, government is giving a lot of emphasis to develop own technologies. We have come up with the PLI 12,000 crore scheme, FAB 76,000 crore scheme, 5% of USF fund that translates to 500, 600 crore per annum. And it's a huge budget. I think government is very keen, and whatever time loss we have done, I think we'll catch up. And you may be knowing that government has already set up a task force for 6G so that we are not behind in 6G. Yes, in the deployment, 5G service rollout, we have been a little late with the auctions coming up somewhere in July. Very soon. I'm sure that this year, a lot of launches of 5G services will happen. And from the CDOT side, we are already giving to BSNL 5G NSA by August 2022, and we will be giving 5G SA next year. With the help of Indian ecosystem, I'm sure that nobody can stop India now.
Great. So I'm taking you a number 3. Mr. Rohit?
Yeah, I would say number 3, but then I will also add the complexity of Indian telco is much more than the complexity of the telco which are deployed in West and European countries, right? Because of the volume of the subscriber what we have, the complexity is much more. So if you take that, our telcos deployments are actually at 4. But yes, from the overall situation, if you look at, I would rate it at 3. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. We have a consensus. It's I think a good score because, as you rightly said, Rohit, India is a complex network. We still have 2G, we have 3G, we have 4G, we are at the cusp of 5G, and we have started talking about 6G. This will be very unique and peculiar globally. We won't find such telecom markets, of this magnitude. You might find others, but of this magnitude. Thanks a lot for joining me this afternoon, and wishing you all the very best. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen, for such a great session.